Brad, thank you so much for having us. This
Oh,
is
thanks for being
such an
here.
incredible event,
Oh,
and
thank
it's
you.
all thanks to your vision.
Yeah, a little bit.
You've
A lot of
introduced
people.
yourself a little bit on the
Yeah,
stage.
yeah.
Great vision. So tell us a little bit more. How did you, because I know you have a background in setting up different conventions, but your longevity, specifically longevity convention, is the first time for you.
Yeah. So I kind of retired, and well, and one, I got bored, but I did spend a lot of my time just trying to figure out how I could live longer. And so I went through this, searching. I'm a journalist, so curious, asking questions, trying to find out how to live longer myself. And in that search, I realized, wow, there's two extremes. There are these incredible experts, PhDs and chemists and biologists, and then there's the biohackers here. And I felt like the general public, who we really took aim at, was underserved. The biohackers have their thing out in festivals, and the other extreme, they meet at Davos and all these fancy places. But we came right to West Palm Beach, working class community, to give the same information the billionaires are giving to the general public.
So I wear a couple of different hats. I'm a scientist, so I have a research lab, and we're actively working at the Buck Institute for research on aging, which is located just north of San Francisco. And this is a biomedical research institute that is focused wholly on trying to understand mechanisms of aging. So I'm sure you're familiar. The idea is simple. If we can understand what's driving aging, then we can target simultaneously all of those age-related diseases that are plaguing the modern world. So chronic diseases like neurodegenerative disease, cancer, all of these things. And my lab is really focused around trying to understand the mind-body connection. So I'm a neuroscientist by training, and I'm really, I'm very interested in understanding what are the causal driving factors that are like the first dominoes to fall. We know a lot about the downstream consequences of aging, but what are the things that are really setting all of those processes in motion? And of course, I'm biased, but from my perspective, I think that the brain controls everything. Right? Okay, but it's not ruling like a dictator. It's actually constantly like listening to and integrating feedback from the rest of the body. So there's like a two-way conversation. It's a chemical conversation that's going on between the brain and the rest of your organs. And I think that changes in that chemical conversation with age might be some of those first dominoes to fall. And so that's what my lab works on. And about 5 years ago, we got really interested in the brain ovary conversation, thinking about ovaries as really the pacemaker for aging in women's bodies. So in addition to their role in fertility, and of course they're absolutely essential for having babies, ovaries are also endocrine organs, which means they are participating in that two-way conversation, not just with the brain, but they're signaling to every tissue in a woman's body. They're signaling to your heart, your liver, your bone, your muscle, your breast, everything, your skin. And what happens in the middle of a woman's life when they start to fluctuate and generally stop working for the most part, that can lead to a lot of the things that we think about with respect to aging. And so from my perspective, the fact that we don't understand why ovaries are aging prematurely, so they're actually aging at about 2.5 times the rate of the rest of the tissue in a woman's body. And that's fascinating from the perspective of understanding aging research, but it's also a question of why is that happening? Can we understand what's causing that early aging in ovaries as a way, not necessarily to prolong fertility, although that might be related, but as a way to prolong health span in women?
Your book, Ageless, tell us more about it.
This book, I really just want to change the way that people think about aging, because I think a lot of us imagine it as just a sort of natural process, an inevitable part of being alive. But I try and explain in the book that it is our greatest humanitarian challenge, and that might sound like a slightly strange idea. But if you drill down as a biologist, you realize that aging, it causes cancer, it causes heart disease, it causes dementia. The biological process of aging gives rise to all of the biggest killers in the modern world. And so I see it as our largest cause of death. It causes about 2/3 of deaths globally, so not just in the rich countries. It's more like 80 or 90% in the rich parts of the world. And I think that by developing medicines to slow down, maybe even reverse aspects of the aging process, we can treat not just cancer, not just heart disease, not just frailty, not just wrinkles and grey hair, but all of the above at the same time, potentially, with a handful of medicines. And so I just think that is the most exciting idea in science, and one of the most important sort of social, political, any kind of idea that you could possibly have. So I'm just hugely excited by
couldn't
this.
agree more. And you know what I love about you? I work in the longevity industry in the States, and you are based in Berlin and UK. So tell me, you're familiar with the longevity industry here in US. How is European approach to aging is different from American?
That's a great question. I think in terms of the sort of industry side, obviously there are many differences in the way that our healthcare systems work. I think the American system is phenomenally more expensive, has all kinds of issues of its own that perhaps are above my pay grade to address all of them. I think that actually, though, there are a lot of commonalities if you look at the big picture. One of the challenges that we've got when it comes to medicine, my wife's a doctor actually. When I first met her and started talking to her about the idea of medicines that could slow down or just treat the aging process, she thought I was crazy. And I think one of the big problems that we have is that medical education of biological scientists as well. When I was working as a biologist, I found that often people would have fantastic degrees, fantastic PhDs from great universities. They wouldn't know much about the biology of aging. They perhaps never had a lecture on it, even though it's this really fundamental process. And I think the way this applies to the medical system is our medical care is very reactive. You get a lump, you go to your family doctor, you go to your GP, as we'd call them in Europe, and they say, oh, that looks serious, we're going to send you to a cancer doctor. They do a scan, they do a biopsy, they treat your cancer very much in a silo. We don't think about the whole person when we're treating these things. And more than that, we don't think about the aging process that causes those diseases. We pick off the individual diseases at the end of life as they arise, but the emphasis on prevention is much lower. And I'm not saying this to sort of diss the medical profession. I think doctors do know about the basics, the diet, the exercise, all these things they know can help patients not get ill in the first place. But they're often just too pressed for time. Like if you're a GP, you often have 5 minutes with a patient, and the patient comes in with a particular thing wrong with them. They want that thing sorted out. Maybe you just about manage to squeeze that in. But if you've got more general health advice, they haven't got time to integrate that into the care. And I think that as we get these preventative medications, doctors don't even know about the idea of treating the aging process in quite a lot of cases. And so we're just going to need to transform the way that we think about healthcare. And I think that applies, wherever you are in the world, whichever side of the Atlantic you're on.
I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Oviva Therapeutics. We are a biotechnology company that's developing therapeutics to improve and extend ovarian function. So unlike men, women have an inflection point at is what is now the midpoint of our lives. About age 52, we go through menopause, and that leads to significant declines in health for women. And so what we're aiming to do is better understand ovarian physiology and develop therapeutics that help our ovaries work for a longer period of time, the normal way that they would work, and circumvent the need for other interventions once a woman goes through menopause.
There are longevity experts that are advocating for 40 to 50 grams of protein per meal.
Indeed.
And most of them are animal-based, and there's a lot of advocates for plant-based. And my job as a dietitian to know all the answers, but I, go to experts like you who've been in the industry for how long? 40 years at least?
Oh, maybe 34 years.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, and you've been advocate for plant-based diet since then, right?
Well, since we found out, since Dr. Dean Ornish published the fact that it's the only diet ever shown to reverse the number one killer of men and women, if that's all a plant-based diet can do, reverse our number one killer, shouldn't that be the default diet to proven otherwise? The fact that it can also be so effective in preventing, arresting, reversing other leading killers like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure would seem to make the case for plant-based eating simply overwhelming. The confusion in whether we're talking about heart disease or whether we're talking about anti-aging is that people aren't representing the literature. There's one gold standard, and that's the peer-reviewed medical literature. And anyone who says we should increase protein as we age doesn't know the literature. I mean, if you look at the people, the actual anti-aging scientists, not the people that blog about anti-aging science, but like Walter Longo and they're talking about cutting down on protein to live longer. Why? Because we want to boost our the longevity hormone FGF21. We want to reduce the pro-aging enzyme IGF-1, hormone IGF-1, the pro-aging enzyme mTOR. I mean, all those things happen. Reducing inflammation, boosting immunity, all from actually restricting protein down to the recommended levels, which is 0.8 grams per healthy kilogram body weight a day, according to the National Academy of Sciences.